recording. So,
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Alive, my search for the best way to live or ways to live. My name is Jonji Jr. and tonight we have a very special guest. He is the secretary or assistant secretary of the Office of the uh, uh, Presidential Assistant Visayas. Let's give it up for Jonji Gonzalez.
hi, Jig. Hi to your listeners and viewers.
Jonji, I've always wanted to talk to you a long, long time ago, especially after the recent elections, which you had a hand on, which you played a role on, especially on social media. But today we're going to talk about the role of social media in the new normal, because I think because everybody is hunkered down, everybody will be mostly at home. This will be a low-touch economy. I feel that the role of social media will be greatly affected, perhaps in a good way. And I think usage of social media will probably be at an all-time high, not just here in Cebu, not just here in the Philippines, but all over the world. But before we go there, Sir Jonji, I know that, like I said earlier, you had a role, especially in the area, in the Visayas, in the region, when it comes to the social media operations of the campaign of our President Duterte. Can you give us a brief background? Because I think this previous election was won in large part because of social media. Maybe you can tell us what you can reveal, what happened during those years leading up to the election.
Well, since 2014, I dabbled into social media after sensing that there would be a shift from mainstream to social media. I started to open 10minutes.ph, then rebranded it to magstoria.com and made it into an entertainment portal for Cebuanos, for Bisaya in general. And in 2015 we were able to help then mayor, now President Duterte, uh, you know to as if we wanted to help him run his campaign in the Visayas and Mindanao, where 33% of the population are Bisaya speaking. So our platform was heavily used for that time, and we were so happy that we made a difference in the Visayas and Mindanao region, the Bisaya speaking area, and we did it through using social influencers or social media influencers. They were young people, ages 15, 16, coming up with contents, pro Duterte content that became viral. Every time we created content since the start of the campaign period, even before the start of campaign period, it would go viral. He was a superstar in social media. And I remember in Marco Polo in Davao, he would brag to his friends that, look, my Vine, it was still Vines at the time. Look, I have 2 million views. And he was not even, maybe he didn't understand what social media at the time was yet. But we did it, and it was so cool that these young kids did it for him. And at the end of the elections, we calculated how much reach we were able to do. We did 250 million reach just from the period of February of 2016 to May of 2016. Imagine 250 million reached on social media, just doing all Duterte content. So that's, in fact, my friend in Manila said, Manila was surprised how come Duterte made it, because they didn't know what was happening on the ground, what was happening on Visayas and Mindanao, how social media really helped Duterte. At the time, no mainstream media was covering then the president. It was all against him, the mainstream media. So it was really very underground movement, just social media, Facebook. I think it really made a lot of difference. And we were also able to get we call them the OFW DDS, who also created their own content. And all we did was seed and distribute their content. They were all rooting for then Mayor Duterte, and they would come up with content. When we see the content, good content, we give it and seed it to the platforms we have. At that time, we had a group of network of about easily 15 million followers. Compile them all together. So 2016.
The perception in the early stages of the election or the campaign was that Duterte was the least funded presidential aspirant at that time, and it wasn't even clear until the last minute whether he was going to run or not, right? I guess that was part of the strategy too. But my question here, Jonji, is was your use of social media part of the strategy, or was it by necessity? Because social media, although it's kind of pricey, also it's not as expensive as traditional media. Was it part of the overall strategy, or was it out of necessity because you couldn't afford at that time, early in the campaign, to advertise in traditional media?
I think it was both. It was part of the strategy because we felt that he suddenly became a superstar on social media, that ordinary Filipinos just created content for him, campaigned for him on social media. That all we did was just seed the content. We were creating content for him, but most of the content that we put out were just made by the Filipinos. We call them now DDS, Duterte diehard supporters. They were the ones creating content for him, campaigning for him on social media. And so it was by design or strategy, because we felt that there was people creating content for him. And it was also partly by necessity, because really we didn't have the budget to campaign for him through mainstream media. And if I may share you a story, the first TV ad that was approved by him was done here in Waterfront, Lahug. And that TV ad that first came out on Magstoria as a leaked ad. So it was when people started to realize, oh, he might be running, because he's coming up with an ad that really went viral on social media. Then days after, it was picked up by mainstream media, and that's when everybody really started thinking that he was going to run for president because he had an ad on TV.
You mentioned that the reach of the campaign was 250 million Duterte posts in a certain period of time, right?
Yes,
and
yes,
your detractors would probably, I hear this a lot, that to be able to mount a social media campaign as humongous as this, you must have hired a room full of people to do this all for you. Was all of this organic, or did you hire a room full of people to be their keyboard warriors, so to speak?
Okay, let me tell you an anecdote. Even my aunt in the States told me that, oh, I heard stories that you rented a whole floor of a condominium full of keyboard warriors doing the campaign for the president. And we were all laughing when my team heard it, because number one, we really didn't have the budget. And it was really the people, and it was because of his authenticity. Social media, you don't go viral on social media if you are not authentic. That's one very important ingredient. And if you notice, people that go viral, content that goes viral on social media are really content that's authentic. That's not TV style or movie style. It has to be very authentic. You show your true self. You're practically naked on social media. That's how the netizens want it. They don't want a very polished content. And because Duterte is a very authentic person, people loved him, and they could relate to him. And so they created content and, distributed the content. It just goes viral. So it was practically the people doing it. And the good thing for us, all we did was just seed it. Social media, three things. Number one, content is king. And we had a very good content because we had a very vulnerable and authentic candidate. Number two, distribution is queen. And we had distribution because we had a lot of DDS doing the distribution. They were campaigning for him. OFWs were doing all the campaigning, and they would send it out. And that's why when we were putting out content, sometimes we have to time it at 11 o'clock in the evening because that's 11 o'clock in the morning around the world or in the US. So we had some strategies in place because we wanted to reach the OFWs who we wanted to send a message because they would also create content out of what we create. So it was really a collaboration between people, ordinary people doing social media.
You know, one of the things that people talk about during that period was also the elections in the United States, right? Wherein Cambridge Analytica was being mentioned, and the collusion with the Russians was also mentioned. In fact, it was a big storyline in the U.S. elections. You had none of that, right? I mean, like, you had no foreign interference. You had no Russians who were keyboard warriors, who had agendas, for the United States elections. You didn't have any of that in the Philippines.
Okay, this one I can reveal now. During the 2016 local campaign, we were up against a very big candidate in one of the cities here, and he had a very big social media page with almost 1 million followers. He had trolls all over, and so we were trying to, find trolls on our own to fight him, and we could not even find one. We were trying to tap DDS people, trying to hopefully get some keyboard warriors, but none was available because there was really none in the first place. There were no trolls from DDS. So we could not hire a single keyboard warrior because there was none in the first place. So really that shows that we really did not have keyboard warriors in the first place. And it's really content. And when you have content, very good content, as I said, it's content is king. So people just love content. They shared it for us, and that's how it went.
So Cambridge Analytica, the Russians, nothing to do with Philippine elections.
Nothing to do with it.
Now, move forward to 2020 with all of those things that you have learned in helping elect a president, who is our current president right now, Rodrigo Duterte. Now we have this pandemic, Sir Jonji. Now it's been, I don't know, almost 3 months now. We have been on lockdown, and the world is changing rapidly. And I always like to repeat this: the pandemic is not a restart button. It is an accelerant of things that are supposed to be happening in the first place. Now here we are. The future is forced upon us. Knowing what you know, knowing how powerful social media was as a tool to elect a president of the Republic of the Philippines, how do you see the role of social media now in the new normal?
Well, now you're seeing people buying stuff online using Facebook, Instagram, and maybe even Twitter. But in Cebu, Twitter is not as famous as in Manila. And that in itself, just today, I heard a story where a carinderia in the south of Cebu was jam-packed by Grab or something, Food Panda. They were lining up in that place, and it was just a carinderia lined up by all these Food Panda deliverers, and they were buying from that carinderia. And how would a carinderia sell? How did we sell with the ECQ lockdown now? So it was all, I'm sure it's all social media, it's all Facebook. So the carinderia owner, maybe a millennial, used his social media through Facebook. And I think that's going to happen already, and it's really going to accelerate. As you said, it's here. It's social media, and I even told my sister, who's also into the restaurant business, to start rethinking or waiting for the reopening of your restaurant, because that's not how it will be. It's all going to be takeout from now on. No one would dare to go and eat out, even if we're going to be downgraded to GCQ or even MGCQ, when everybody will be allowed to eat out. People will just start continuing what they're doing during the ECQ days and order their food online. And not just food, but all the stuff you want to buy, it's all online. So that's going to be the now new normal.
Jonji, we have a lot of malls out there, not just here in Cebu, but in the entire Philippines, all over the world, in fact. And it's always been that there's always been a struggle or even a sort of a tension between shopping online and going to the malls, right? But culturally, Filipinos, Cebuanos especially, we love to go to the malls. But now that we're here in the situation, how do you feel about all these beautiful malls that are out there? How do you think will this affect their business? Because the way you describe it, people will be buying food and stuff online. How will the malls be in the new normal?
Well, I read an article written by a Harvard graduate, a Filipino Harvard graduate, and that was a few years ago, when he wrote in his article that SM could be the biggest e-commerce in the Philippines, because they have so many malls, and they could just turn their malls into warehouses, and everybody could just use their video cards to buy goods, and then use the malls as a the place where you could put your stuff as so that might happen also, because nobody would want to go out. And even if we will be downgraded, the behavior has changed. These 3 months, next 6 months, the behavior will change. We will be really forced to do social media, or just forced to do things online. And we're loving it. Zoom is really getting to be very famous. We would rather do Zoom than travel, because we're too scared to ride an airplane at this time. I don't see myself riding a plane in the next 6 months. I'd rather just do all my meetings online, and I feel safe if that happens.
So is that all good? I mean, like, what could possibly go wrong if everything is in social media, everything is online? Maybe you can show us the dark side of what could be if everything goes online, or most of the things that we do that we would normally do online or offline in the real world will be done online. Maybe you can give us a sneak peek of what could potentially go wrong.
Well, number one, I hope city planners will start looking into building parks and playgrounds, so that there will be an opportunity to still go out outside, breathe the fresh air, and socialize with social distancing if you have a park. But the dark side, I think our data will be captured by all these big, like Facebook, Google, and you'll just suddenly realize when you're online that everything that you're browsing will suddenly, everything that you browse, you'll suddenly be, shown what you want, and then forced to buy stuff online, because they could already analyze your, your habits, your patterns, your likes and dislikes, and they would know what to sell you. And I think that's where privacy will be a problem also when everything is online. So that's really going to be a thing that will happen, the privacy of everybody who goes online. So it's going to be something that, even legislators have to look into, because our privacy will no longer be really protected with everybody going online.
You know what, Donji, just to demonstrate to all our viewers, the quality of our interview is not top notch. And I think it's largely in part because of the internet infrastructure that we have in the Philippines. Are you hopeful about our internet infrastructure? Because from what I gather, we have one of the worst internet infrastructures in the world. Is that? Can you speak to that, Jonji?
Oh, well, the good thing now, even before this pandemic happened, the government is trying to come up with a strategy to share the cell sites of all the players into one place. Instead of just all these players putting up their cell sites, they'll just be compiled into one cell site, and all the brands are there. So then we can roll out as many cell sites we can. This is what happened when the era of was famous, and we even overthrew a president because of text messaging. Remember Estrada during that famous envelope issue? It was all because of people texting, because we became the texting capital of the world. And so the telcos decided to just, sit on their laurels and say, hey, you're earning a lot of money with all people texting. So they didn't bother to put up cell sites as they should have. And then now that everybody is online using video and using audio, so suddenly the need for more cell site is getting to be very vital, and it's not easy to roll out new cell sites. So I think that's what we have to do now, really fast track the rolling out of more cell sites, because every cell site can only accommodate as many volume of data. And if you have less cell sites, then you'll have problem with internet speed. So it's really something that the government has to help out with the telcos. And I think the government is doing something about it.
In some parts of the world, Sir Jonji, the internet infrastructure is care of the government. Because from what I gather, investing on internet infrastructure is very pricey, and it's a long-term investment for a private company to invest on. And a lot of nations actually have their governments who are investing on their internet infrastructure. Are we even thinking about our government to invest on our internet infrastructure, or are we just going to bring in another player to make the playing field interesting? The field interesting.
Well, one is we're adding a third player, and that's going to really, get the competition going, because there's going to be a third player. The other is really the policy of the government to have shared cell sites. It's really the cell site that's really giving us the problem, because the more cell sites we have, the better we can have more data and accommodate more data, accommodate more video calls, accommodate more doing things online. And it's very difficult to put up cell sites. You have to go to the barangay, you have to go to the LGU, you have to get permit from DNR, and you have to get a lot of permits just to put up one cell site. So when this strategy of putting a shared cell site by these telcos run by a private company who would just let these telcos rent these spaces, then we might be able to roll out cell sites as fast as we can. And that's what we need now when everybody's going online. Just an anecdote again, during the ECQ days, you'd notice that your internet connection becomes very slow at night when everybody from the call center is awake, because they are in their homes or they are staying in their condominiums, and they're no longer using the lines that they used to use in their buildings. And that's when the internet connection or speed drops, because everybody's online. The call centers are online, and that's something that government has to address as fast as we can.
So, are you aware of any sort of timetable, Jonji? Because our internet speeds are just infuriating, and I don't know if we can live with this quality any longer. Is there like a timetable? Is that happening anytime soon?
I hope it will be happening very soon. I think government is very aware of it now, especially our experience when we had ECQ, because I'm sure even the telcos were really having a hard time serving their customers, because everybody was at home. Even the call centers was working at home, and there was really a problem with the speed of the internet. And so that being said, I'm sure government and the telcos are doing something about it as we speak now.
Jonji, we're still in the middle of a pandemic right now, right? And we're already in our third month of lockdown. Um, what do you think is the role of social media in this pandemic right now? Give us an idea what you see on the ground, what you see online. Uh, uh, is social media a good thing for a pandemic?
Uh, this is how I want to describe social media. This is how I describe social media all the time. It's just like a candle. It could be the light in the dark, or it could cause fire. So it depends how you use a candle. It depends how you use social media. If you use social media for disseminating fake news, it's the fastest way of doing it at lightning speed. If you want social media to be used to really educate the audience or the people on wearing masks, social distancing, following health protocols, it can really reach a lot of audience. So social media can be a bad thing, or it could be a good thing depending on who's using it. So it's really us.
You hit upon an idea that you mentioned earlier. It could cause fire, right? And one of the biggest fires of social media is fake news. It is so difficult to decipher which one is which, and truths are difficult to find, and it's just impossible to sift through the rubble when it comes to going online, especially through social media. How do you think the government, or just maybe perhaps Facebook, I don't know who will do this, how can we control that? How can we stop the dissemination of fake news?
This is a theory that I have been talking with my friends, and who are really fond of sharing fake news or misinformation? The older people, because they were never trained to do critical thinking. We were never trained to really decipher the truth, because all we were trained to just read a newspaper and think that everything that newspaper gives us are all facts, true, and credible. Now we will be consuming content online, and no one is telling us if this is credible or not. And whatever your friends send you, you think it's okay because it's your friend that is sending you. So credibility now lies on the one who sends you. So if friend who is sending the correct news or a verified, credible news, and tendency is you'll just share it. And if you believe in it because it's a friend who is sending it to you, then you share it. So I think what's important now in this age of social media, when everybody's now using things online, is to educate our youth and educate even our older people to really start doing critical thinking, to really process what you read. Don't just believe in it right away. If you have doubts, go to Google, check the news, check CNN, check Philippine Star or Inquirer, or check the radio stations if they're using it. Maybe that's more credible than just sharing something that you don't even know what website is doing it. So we have to do it on our own. We have to be taught critical thinking. That's something we have to learn.
One of the scariest things about social media, or the internet for that matter, is it is, you band together, like-minded people band together if they believe in something or someone, and it's possible. Let's say, for example, the flat Earth movement, right? It's possible that you can gather together online people of the same thought that the Earth is flat, and you can live in a bubble because you are just going to dig deep into why the Earth is flat, and you can just Google away and find tons and tons of information about that fact that you think is a fact, that the Earth is flat. So it's possible to live in a bubble your entire life without you knowing it.
That's very true. That's why really we have to educate our young to start, or to stop just being taught to memorize. Let's use our brain to do critical thinking. Let's use our mind to use our minds for strategic thinking. instead of, telling our kids to memorize everything, because you can just Google everything. The important thing is, what's true or not. And how to do that is really to do critical thinking. So there has to be a shift from memorization to critical thinking, because when we were young, we were always told to memorize how many regions we have in this country, or memorize, a lot of things. We don't have to do that now. Use your brain to process information. Use your brain for critical thinking instead of just memorization. Anyway, Google is there. So just Google information, and then you'll know if it's true or not if you have critical thinking.
Social media, of course, is using the information highway, or the World Wide Web, and of course, the World Wide Web is worldwide. And like I was alluding to earlier, the United States elections was there was so much interference from a foreign power, the Russians. At least that's what we were reading about, or they were talking about over there in the United States. How dangerous is it for a foreign nation who has interests in another nation, let's say the Philippines, in an election? How possible is it for a foreign nation to interfere with an election?
Well, that's what I said earlier, that we are now being watched by all these platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all these open platform. They would read our habits. They could know what we like, what we dislike. So when they gather our data, they could now target who to send their message to. So that's really a issue that we are faced with. And there is something that I also notice now. If you think about it, we are shifting from putting our content on Facebook on our wall to talking to group chats. And that's even more dangerous, because you would not anymore see what is being talked about if you are not a member of that group chat. So suddenly you will just, wake up in the morning that there is this issue raging online, but it's just talked about on group chats, no longer on your wall. Take, for example, the A and B. They don't really post stuff online. They don't even like or dislike or comment online, but they will not hesitate to send, sometimes misinformation or disinformation through group chats. And that's very difficult to monitor. So we have shifted, the behavior is now starting to shift from being more public to more private by going to group chats or Messenger or Telegram or Viber. And they have this capability to have thousands and thousands of members, and just one click of the button, send one content, it goes to everybody and it goes viral without you knowing it, because we can't monitor it anymore unless you're a member of that group chat.
So my question was, how possible is it for a foreign nation to interfere with another nation's elections?
As long as they have access to data, and I'm sure they can have access to data, and even if Facebook or Twitter or Instagram are saying that it's being controlled, they are not giving it out. I still think that that's what they're selling. Not just Facebook or Twitter or Facebook. Any app is the business model now could be selling data. When you download an app, you are asked questions. You are asked things that you have to answer before you download the app, before you when you register. So that itself would really give marketeers information of the persons online. And when that happens, they can target communication to specific persons on specific issues. So I think that's a reality that we are faced with, and there's no stopping there.
Facebook has, I think, half of the world is using Facebook, more powerful than any religion, than any government. Do you feel that Facebook is getting too powerful?
I think so. In fact, I'm a little scared using Messenger because I think that when you send a message to your friend, Facebook is reading your message. They are looking for keywords that you are talking about because they will analyze it and provide you with the advertisement. When you talk about shoes, you'll suddenly just find out that on your wall, you'll be seeing ads about shoes. When you're talking about cars, you'll suddenly find out that there will be advertisement on cars on your wall. So they're listening. I think they're listening.
So they're getting too popular. In fact, the United States is already talking about how they will deal with such a powerhouse that is Facebook. Some parts of the United States want to sort of break it up. Some people in the United States think that they should. This is the free market of ideas, the marketplace of ideas, and the best idea wins. So just make sure that people create competitors of Facebook. What do you think is the solution to this monopoly that is Facebook, Jonji? What do you think, looking ahead, what do you think will happen? Because we all thought that Facebook will be just another Friendster, another Multiply, another flash in the pan. But here we are in 2020, Facebook is stronger than ever. What do you think will happen down the line? Will Facebook double, triple? Will every single person in the entire world be using Facebook? What are your thoughts on that, Jonji?
I think it's the if you look at Facebook, they created several other products, not just Facebook. They created Messenger. They created My Stories or My Day, Instagram, because there's a shift, a behavioral shift from talking publicly to going private, and they're using Messenger. They're using My Day, where you can only post something in 24 hours. They feel that there's a behavior online that you don't want to share so many things to so many people. But and that's a little scary also, because then a lot of disinformation can come out and you're not even aware that you're targeted already, or you're being bashed by all these people because you're not member of that group chat. So I think Facebook is shifting from going public to starting to have conversation in what they call in the living room, and that's Messenger. That's what I think WhatsApp. They own WhatsApp, and the My Day and My Stories. That's IG Stories, they say. So that's how conversation will be done online.
They bought their competitors like Instagram and WhatsApp. I don't think they created that. I think they bought these social media platforms.
Right. Because of the shift of the behavior of the public, netizens now want to have conversation more private than putting it out on the wall and making it too public. So there's a shift from talking on public and talking in the privacy of your chat room or chat group.
So Facebook will be more powerful than ever in the future. Do you see a shift in usage? Do you think that Facebook will still remain as powerful as that it is, let's say 5-10 years down the line? Because I think in some parts of the world, especially in the United States, I think a lot of people are already using Instagram and Twitter, right? Is Facebook still the main social media platform in the West, or is it just here in the Philippines?
I think it's just here in the Philippines. I think TikTok is getting steam, a lot of steam, even getting a lot of steam in the Philippines also. But I think Facebook could easily shift to something else. They could become the bank of the world. They could start, transacting businesses, money transfer. They could very well do that with 3 billion followers. Very easy to pivot. So they're just waiting for the timing, and maybe this is the timing now when everybody's in the pandemic, nobody's going out, no one wants to go to the bank, so they could easily shift and tweak their platform to something else that's in need of whatever the public needs.
One of the biggest things that happened during the pandemic, and especially during the pandemic, is the communities that are growing on Facebook. Those barter communities, those bid communities, those buy and sell communities. Maybe you can speak to that, Jonji. What do you think of that?
Well, that's really what I think is going to happen. Everything will really be online when people will start realizing that, oh, I can do work on Facebook, I can do work on Zoom, I can do work at home, and I can even sell and do business online. So there's really going to be a very fast track shift to doing things online. And it's not just Facebook. There's a lot of platforms out there that is going to, well, Zoom, for instance. You never thought of Zoom getting very popular, and suddenly, just because of this pandemic, it became very popular. And I think Facebook is even doing a catch-up game now on this platform. So it's really going to be an online thing. And the thing is, there has to be also a catch-up in the speed, internet speed, or it's going to be a problem when everybody really uses online.
All of the things that you mentioned, Jonji, are just buying and selling, purchasing stuff. Everything will be online. Meetings will be online. What other facets of life do you think, aside from the ones that you mentioned, will all go online, will all go on social media, aside from those that you mentioned?
In 2013 or 14, I already said that I hope I would see one day schools going online. I hope that students will no longer be stuck inside a four-wall classroom. And I think and I believe we will be seeing that very soon, when there is no vaccine, when we are so scared to get our sons to school. So educators will now start looking into, educating our kids online. And that's going to be a very big thing. Aside from just the buy and sell, education will start to be done online.
You mentioned earlier that Facebook and all the social media platforms, they're not in the business of, well, primarily, they're not in the business of ads, although they have ads. Primarily, they're in the business of attention and gathering of data. Isn't it kind of scary that, for example, if a government buys data on its people through Facebook and manipulates their hearts and minds through Facebook, isn't that kind of a scary scenario?
Yeah, I think that's not even the future. That's even happening now, and that's really very scary. I think they are now buying data online, and that's a business model of many of these platforms. It's no longer ads. It's really data. It's really knowing the person who's using Twitter, Instagram, and it's a data are going to sell. It's no longer just the ads. That's not anymore going to happen, because people are just too tired of seeing ads. They would rather see native advertising, things placed on your screen that's embedded in a story or in an article that you would not even know that you're being sold. So I think it's the data that's really getting to be the big thing.
Things happen so fast on the internet. The speed of the internet is unbelievable. Not our speed, but in terms of change, the speed of change on the rate of change of the internet is dramatic. It's unbelievable. Do you think, based on what you learned back in 2015 during the campaign, do you think the same principles apply, or will you rethink the way you will use the internet moving forward? Not just for the campaign, but for just day to day. Yeah.
If it's social media, I think the fundamentals will still be there. The fundamentals of being successful online on social media is authenticity, vulnerability, really making content as king. So I think these are still basic fundamentals, and maybe creating digestible, snackable content, because we're not really fond of watching too long content, because we just want to browse a lot of things. So if you make it too long, we get bored. So and especially in the Philippines, when speed is still very slow, important is really digestible. I call it digestible, snackable content, and it has to be framed in a way that you would want to click that content. So there has to be some science in it, and if you don't know that science, you'll have a hard time communicating on Facebook.
I completely understand that. In fact, um, maybe you're referring to the show as well. It's getting a little too lengthy. But one of the things that I've noticed on social media, especially on the podcast platform, is that they're pretty long. In fact, I follow one of these podcast superstar giants, Joe Rogan. His shows are like 2 hours long. He just goes on and on. And I think traditional media is about, that 5-minute interview, about the pandemic, which is impossible to fit in 5 minutes, right? And a 20-minute interview with 10 people on the screen talking about one issue in 10 minutes. That's impossible. And I think there's a growing market, especially in the United States, for the long form, for people to talk about the nuances of the issue. Because, big issues are big because they're so nuanced. There's so many things to talk about, and you can't digest and explain everything in 5 minutes. What do you think of the long form? Jonji, go ahead.
I agree with the long form. The problem is our speed is still a problem, and it's when we have very slow speed, you don't have the patience to really watch long form. But okay, I can safely say that in 2014, 2015, people were consuming content that are just 1 minute or less. But now they're willing to consume content at about 10 minutes to 20 minutes. And when the speed is going to get better, I'm sure we'll want to consume content that's an hour long. That's not going to be a problem. The problem here is really the speed. When the speed is going to be okay, we will be going long form. That's a given. We've seen that in the United States.
So it is because of the speed of the internet. That's why people in the Philippines don't watch that long. But sooner or later, once we get our act together and have better internet speeds, I think you think that things will be consumed and longer forms of shows like such as this will be consumed by more Filipinos. I'm happy to hear that. Jonji, go ahead, continue, please.
And also not just the length of it, it's really the content. So if the content is really good, they'll really consume the content. So it's really content is king, and the speed is very dependent. We are also very dependent on the speed, and as soon as we have very good internet speed, we don't care if it's not a very nice studio, very good lighting. Just the same enough. Like kind of positions is how people want to show them.
What's that again, Jonji? You're cutting out. You say?
Oh, oh yeah. Yeah. I think it's going to be dependent on the speed. If the speed is slow, then we'll prefer to consume very short or digestible or snackable content. But when the speed starts to speed up and when it gets faster, we will be willing to consume long form content. So it's dependent on the speed.
One of the biggest factors of the ascendancy of the president is the Bisaya vote, right? And we are so proud of our heritage. And it's been a long time since a Bisaya president came to power. Do you think that same sort of campaign, the same sort of thought process of igniting the Bisaya vote will still work in the next election, or will you see another trend happening? What are your thoughts moving forward, looking ahead, Jonji?
Well, I think anyone who wants to succeed on Facebook has to be authentic, and has to be vulnerable. So it's somebody who can bullshit his way. He can use this language that are not allowed on TV, but on social media. We just love it because that's who we are. That's authenticity. So anybody who's authentic, anybody who's vulnerable will do well on social media and will do
Not
well in the
necessarily the
company.
Binisaya,
So
not necessarily that
not
anymore.
necessarily the Binisaya. It's really the authenticity and vulnerability. And it's very difficult to be authentic and vulnerable on social media because you're too scared to be bashed. Huh? Our innate need is to connect and belong. So if we get bashed, we get stressed out. So we would rather be less authentic because we are just too scared to be bashed. But if you're authentic, you're not scared to show your soul. You're not scared to get naked online. Not really naked in the sense that you have to take off your shirt, but show your feelings. Say what you want to say. Then you'll be successful online. In fact, my theory is even in media, when you report, they would rather want to hear a reporter crying if the story is something very emotional. On TV or in news before, you are not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to show your emotions. But in social media, it's vulnerability and authenticity. So when you don't have that, you'll not be able to become very successful online.
We have a lot of viewers who are watching this show right now on social media, or will be watching this on social media, Jonji. What's your message to them? In this new normal, how can they survive? And of course, social media, how can they use it to their advantage?
Well, number one is you have to learn how to protect yourself online first, because no matter what, you just want to have your privacy also. So be very careful. They are no, they all these platforms are watching us. They're getting our data and they're selling it to whoever wants to buy it. So if you want to have less footprint on digital, then use less of social media. But unfortunately, that's not the case. We will all be social media, so you'll just have to be very careful, be very watchful of putting your privacy, too much privacy out there.
Can you give us some tips, perhaps, Jonji, on how to ensure that whether you can still reveal yourself and be vulnerable and be honest and be authentic, but not reveal certain kinds of information? What do you mean aside from constantly changing your passwords, of course, right? What else should I do on social media?
Well, maybe one thing that I always tell my kids is stop. Don't post real time as much as possible. Don't post real time, because that's when people will know where you are, what you're doing, and if there are people who really wants to do something bad at you, they can very well track you. So maybe just give it a little time so that you'll not be in that place real time. But unfortunately, some young kids, they just want to brag about, hey, I'm here, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And when you're on vacation, so when I usually say when you're on vacation, you're not in your home, no one's home. Maybe you can just put your pictures after you return in your home so that the thieves would not know that no one is at home. So these are simple tips, but you have to really watch. There are a lot of bad things that can happen to you on social media.
Jonji, I saw your video earlier with your reminders to the Cebuanos for this pandemic. Maybe you can say a few words. Maybe you have a message for the Cebuanos out there who are probably watching this video right now, hunker down in lockdown, and they want to hear a voice of reason. Maybe you can tell them a few things, Jonji, before you go.
Okay, number one, let's go back to the prevalence rate study that was done by the Tri-Cities of Cebu City, Mandaue City, Lapu-Lapu City. They conducted randomized rapid test to 46,000 households. And the result for Cebu City alone was 2.2 IgM. That means 2.2 infected. And if you extrapolate the 2.2%, that could be an estimate of 24,000 infections on the days of May 6 to May 20. Now, when we did GCQ, when we were downgraded to GCQ last June 1, these asymptomatics started to go out, started to work, started to go to the malls, and started infecting people. So my message to the public is still follow the most important health protocol by wearing masks and social distancing. Because if you wear your mask, you do not only protect yourself, you also protect the one outside. And the other thing is, when you're eating in the office, don't eat beside someone else, because you're not wearing your mask and you might be talking, and this is not airborne but droplets. And if you have you're affected, you're even asymptomatic, you might infect somebody in your office. So be very aware that even if we are now, good thing that we're on ECQ, but it's a bad thing for the economy. Let us remind ourselves, it's a wake-up call. Let us remind ourselves that this virus is still here to stay until we will have that vaccine, which might just come 1 year or 2 years from now. So very important, wear masks, and very important, continue to do social distancing and hand washing, of course. And if you don't have soap and water, use alcohol. So once you do this, you stop the spread of the virus, because no matter how we put more beds in the hospitals, no matter how we have more PPEs, no matter how we have more N95 masks for our health workers, if we don't follow the health protocols, if we don't do the prevention method, we will just continue to infect, and we'll just have problems after problems.
Jonji, thank you so much for that message. If they want to catch you, or maybe anything that you like people to go to, tell us your social media touch points. Go ahead, sir.
Well, you can visit our page, Office of the Presidential Assistant for the Visayas, OPAV. You can still visit Magstoria, or you can visit Bisaya Inspiring Photos. That's the 3 pages that we really distribute our content. But I have also my personal page, Jonji Y. Gonzalez. So if you need any message, just drop a line, and I hope to be able to answer your question.
Jonji, thank you so much. I am so happy to talk to you. I hope we can do this one person to person one of these days. Thank you so much for doing this. I've been wanting to do this for years. Thank you so much, Assistant Secretary to the Office of the Presidential Assistant, Visayas, Jonji Gonzalez. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Stay safe, sir.
Okay, you too.